Okay, so the focus of today's contract training is going over the buyer accepted offer checklist. I decided to isolate these trainings into the buyer contract to close checklist versus a listing contract to close checklist. The shell is pretty much the same, but a little bit more involved, I would say, from the buyer's perspective. So thought we would just keep it to this. So this is an example of the buyer accepted offer checklist that is in the new associate guides that all of our new agents get. You need to mute. Actually, maybe you should just watch this up here. Yeah. So this is, I think this is a basic outline of the buyer accepted offer checklist. As you grow your businesses, use this as a basis, but as your processes develop, you could expand on this pretty easily. I know mine, for example, got really detailed because my memory is terrible and I just wanted to make sure that I had a checkpoint for the most mundane thing. I know. So just kind of keep that in mind, that this could be just a basis for you to expand on as you grow your businesses and grow your post-close processes. And but again, this is the one that you guys will find in your new associate guides, and this is what will kind of stem from.
Hey, Steph.
Yes, dear.
Is this going to be available on like the drive too?
This training, yep.
No, I'm sorry, like this checklist.
I can put this in the drive. Yeah, I think we have it in our onboard paperwork that's just specific to Julia and I, but I can add this to our Google Drive for sure.
Okay, that'd be cool. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we have a different version of this that's available in a spreadsheet version, but anyway, I'm gonna put this one on the drive too. So okay, so part of this process is command submission, of course. So that is the uploading of all of the executed contracts into your opportunities. We're not going to dive into setting up an opportunity here, but I can point you to the YouTube videos that can remind you guys of that process if you need it. But that is the, uploading your documents for review by Kimmy and myself. We'll talk about the different parties and communication flow, scheduling the various inspections, closings, etc., and some organizational tips that I just have developed over the years. So I have an accepted offer for my buyer. Now what? This process, I feel, is another spot for you as an agent to shine for your clients. Keeping on top of these things. I mean, it's just a comment, you get the accepted offer and it took so much work to get that accepted offer. And I feel that a lot of agents can kind of drop the ball here in this process. It's very detail oriented, and as sales agents, that's not always our strong suit. So that being said, we do have, I want to remind everyone of our transaction coordinators that you can hire through Focus Title. If you are going to utilize a transaction coordinator, I still think it's really important to have a really good handle on this process and understand the shell of it. You're going to be communicating with your transaction coordinators, but also being able to answer questions for your clients as well. I mean, once you hand it off to somebody else, you're still going to be fielding those questions from your clients. So even as, a new mentee, I think, for the Lake Country office who is in that mentor program, through your first 5 transactions, I think it's good to do this process yourself before you make the decision of going on to and hiring a transaction manager. And then for your, likewise at North Shore, for those of you in the launch program, I think kind of taking this on yourself is important for your first few transactions for sure. That's my little soapbox on it. Okay, so the typical parties to a transaction in the contract to close process is the listing agent, of course, your buyer, of course, your buyer's lender, the buyer's inspector, the buyer's title company, which is, I should reword this to say lender's title company. The lender is going to be hiring the title company, the seller's title company, and then a miscellaneous party to the transaction could be a radon tester as well. So these are your typical parties that you're going to be in communication with throughout this process at certain points. And then I just wanted to highlight the tech platforms that will be used in this process. So you've got zip forms, of course, which, you have set up your buyer client through the buyer agency agreement through zip forms. Your offer was drafted through zip forms. But then in the post accepted offer process, if there is a notice that needs to be drafted or an amendment that needs to be drafted, you're going to revisit zip forms during this period as well. Command, of course. So this is again where you're going to be submitting your opportunities for compliance review within 7 days after accepted offer, for Kimmy's review and for my review. Gmail, of course, but just kind of an organizational tip that I will highlight later on. Gmail has a function of email templates that you can, sorry, I have to keep an eye on the participants, the waiting room. I use, I have developed templates for the most commonly things I've said throughout a transaction. So I think I was meeting with 2 new agents this morning and kind of stockpiling these things as you go along and develop your business that you can access later. They're just like these tiny time savers that really make a difference. So I'll show you that later. Your Google Calendar, of course. Again, this morning, just highlighting the need for your calendar and keeping on top of your calendar, just in real estate in general, but when you are identifying the dates and deadlines per the offer to purchase, you are going to want to put them on your calendar. That is key. You will forget them. And you just need to see it in advance of when it's approaching so that you can check in on some of these items. Missing a deadline is just terrible. You cannot miss a deadline. You have to follow the contracts and keep yourself organized. The Google Drive. So just again, as you're building your businesses, and, why I'm highlighting this, for example, in my buyer folder, I've got all of my checklists, of course, and then my vendor lists, my lender lists, which you will be providing to your buyers. But then specifically to this period, your inspector list, you're going to want to start compiling a list of inspectors for your clients. And then timeanddate.com, I'm just highlighting this. This is the website that I use to figure out all of my dates and deadlines instead of relying on counting it out on a calendar. So I'll show you that as well. This again is the overview, the larger list. I'm going to break this down into pieces. But this is the new associate guide checklist, which I just showed you before. All right. So within the first 24 to 48 hours after your accepted offer with your buyer client, the first thing that I do is I send a complete copy of the, well, no, I'm going to backtrack. First thing I do is get the earnest money instructions out to the buyers. We really want to promote using trust funds. So you as a, I'm going to pull this up onto MLS. You as a buyer's agent will be kickstarting this process if they're going to be using trust funds. If the listing agent uses trust funds, you will find that on MLS. And it's super easy, and we've got written out instructions for trust funds as well. But this is a way for buyers to send in their earnest money electronically. Oh, geez. And for a $5 fee, I think. So it brings you to, you'll see the trust funds link up here. Then it'll just ask you a series of questions. Earnest money will be held by the listing broker 9 times out of 10. So again, just look for this in the MLS data. Another more common way for submitting earnest money is, of course, a personal check. So 9 times out of 10, the listing firm will be holding on to the earnest money, and funds will need to be delivered to the listing firm. So if that is the case, you can instruct them either to drop off the earnest money, or they can mail it. If they mail it, just a key thing to point out, as long as it's postmarked by the deadline, so 9 times out of 10, your earnest money deadline is 3 days after accepted offer. As long as that earnest money is postmarked prior to that 3-day deadline, that counts as meeting the deadline. So if it is postmarked but then arrives after, that is perfectly acceptable. So again, you're getting these earnest money instructions off to your buyer. Then within this first 24 to 48 hours, I'm sending my inspector list to the buyers. And it's good practice to recommend at least 3 inspectors. They can choose and do their homework on an inspector if they feel necessary. But then they're going to set their inspection time with the home inspector and then communicate back to you when that time is. It is crucial to get this process rolling right away. I would say this is definitely done within the first 24 hours of an accepted offer. We want to get those inspections set up ASAP. So once you learn the buyer's, or once you learn the time and date of the inspection, you're going to communicate that with the listing agent. And I think it's just good practice, instead of emailing and asking the listing agent, just to go into showing time and set it up as an inspection. That way the seller can confirm or deny it themselves. Next thing I'm doing is emailing a complete copy of the offer to the buyer's lender and CCing the buyers. In my email to the buyer's lender, I am communicating in the body of the email the closing date so that they know that right away. I'm letting them know of the financing commitment contingency deadline. I'm also letting them know of the appraisal deadline in the body of this email. This is one thing that I've made a template for, so I'll just go ahead and show you guys. Show you guys this tip. So in our KW emails, it's a Gmail platform, Google platform. We've got the ability to do templates. So all of these are my most commonly used emails that I've just decided to put in template form to save me this time. So I've got a lender email. And in this, I've got an introduction to myself, when the key dates of the transaction are, again, closing date, loan commitment date, and appraisal date. And then at this point too, I'm also asking the lender to confirm that the buyer has officially applied for financing. In our offers, it used to be an automatic deadline. They have since updated that, but I just still keep it a part of my practice to communicate to the listing agent that the offer or that the buyer has officially applied for financing. So what I do in that case is ask the lender to confirm that they have, and then I just make a PDF of that email and send it off to the listing agent. And it's just a quick FYI, the ball is rolling, buyers have applied for financing. Next thing I am doing within this first 2-day period is figuring out what the dates and deadlines are for the offer to purchase. I am putting that in a form letter to the buyer. I'm sending that off to the buyer. I am then sending that off to the listing agent. And then I'm taking all of those dates and deadlines and I'm entering them on my calendar. So here's an example of my template. And hopefully it's not. So I've got the date that the offer is written, the date that the offer is accepted, the purchase price. I want to highlight when the dates of the offer written and the date that it's accepted. I want that for easy access when I go and populate an amendment later or a notice later. I want to have those at the tip of my hat so I know exactly what to fill in. The purchase price. I've got the earnest money of blank is due blank. Depending on when I have sent off the earnest money instructions, I might delete this, of course, because I may have already sent off the earnest money instructions to them. Proof of financing. So again, in the old offers, it was, and I'm not going to go through the exact contract language, but it used to be about a week that the proof of financing was due. Again, it's not a steadfast deadline, but I just make it a part of my practice to communicate to the listing agent that the financing application has been started. The inspection contingency, the testing contingency, appraisal contingency, loan commitment, closing. I'm communicating with the buyer that the final walkthrough will be up to 3 days prior to closing. And then if a home warranty is included, I also will indicate that here. And then I'll also write the inclusions per the offer and the exclusions per the offer. This is a great template for using this to communicate with your buyers, but then also I'm using this later on at the final walkthrough. I'll quick pull this up and check the inclusions and exclusions as I'm going through the final walkthrough. To make sure that everything is there per the offer or not there per the offer. Figuring out the deadlines. So timeanddate.com, show you that. Oh, and that is a designer I was looking at. Timeanddate.com. So this is a website that I have bookmarked. I use this all the time. So it's timeanddate.com. And you can go down to your date calculators. What date is it in X days? So in the start date, you'll put the accepted offer date. And let's say it's a 10-day contingency for the inspection, 10-day deadline for the inspection contingency. Calculate new date. Thursday, February 18th is when our inspection is due. That's a really helpful one to bookmark. All right, sending these same deadlines to the listing agent to ensure that you are on the same page. So you're going to communicate all of this with your buyer, of course. But then I think it's good to just kind of cut and paste this and modify it slightly to send off to the listing agent and just say, here are the dates that I came up with. Let me know if you have anything different. It's really good to make sure that you guys are communicating with one another and making sure you're on the same page. All of these things too, I just want to comment, you know, demonstrating that you are a good communicator in this, you know, in our world. I mean, it just kind of helps establish your relationships with other agents, you know, making it known and showing that you are good to work with and easy to work with, especially in this market now. All of these little things matter as far as, you know, if all things are equal on an offer, it's down to you and somebody else, a agent on the other side might promote your offer more than the other one because they know that you are a good communicator and easy to work with. So again, all of this kind of just builds on itself. Adding deadlines to the calendar. I've got this in a lot of exclamation points afterward. You guys, you have to add these to your calendar. So this is an example of how I do it. I just put it at the top. I put it in green so that it's a different color from the rest of my daily to-do list. Once these deadlines start passing, I'll write done in front of it. So I know that I don't have to worry about it anymore. And I like doing this, writing the word done in front of it versus just omitting it from the calendar altogether, because you might second guess yourself on whether it was done or not. So, so I just put the address, earnest money due, the address, inspection due, appraisal, loan commitment, all of the deadlines that I had shown you before will go on this calendar. And where this really starts to be key is when you're working with multiple transactions at once. And then here's just an example of the Google email templates. Again, just start building these as you are going along and building your business. It's just a really great organizational time-saving tip. Okay, now the next piece. So actually I want to go back to one more thing. Earnest money receipt. So after you receive the earnest money receipt, so you know, that may be a day or two after the earnest money has been submitted, you're going to want to make sure that the earnest money receipt has been distributed to the lender and to the buyer. Okay, now, you know, this is at the top of your checklist, submitting this into command. I would say that this is kind of next in your order of operations. You're going to do the command opportunity submission. So this is uploading all of your documents, the MLS data sheet, any counter offers, the executed offer to purchase, the addendum A, the real estate condition report, of course, earnest money receipt, home warranty application. Remember that we are declining coverage or making sure that the buyer has declined coverage if we're not including one into the offer to purchase. Your buyer agency agreement under your consultation folder. I'll show you what the, for my newbies, let me show you what the, I think I did it. I think I had it set up for myself and I just went away from it. So this is your command opportunity. And again, where this differs from zip forms is where you're drafting your documents. Once they're executed is when you are going to upload them into your command opportunity. So we've got our consultation folder, and this is where your buyer agency agreement is going to go, and the Keller Williams disclosure. And then our under contract folder. So all of these placeholders mimic what is on the accepted offer checklist. Some of these things may not be applicable depending on the transaction, but they are tagged with optional or required lines. And then just a tip, and just want to point out that you can add custom folders along the left-hand side. So I always create a miscellaneous folder, and this is where I will house follow-up inspections, estimates, the lien waivers if they're going to be applicable to the transaction. I'll put the title commitment in here. I think Kimmy just highlighted this in a recent meeting, like making sure that we're using our command opportunities as our e-filing system. Because once this closes, we can access this later. So it's just good to get in that habit. Just because it's not required for our compliance review, it's just good practice to keep all of the documents associated with the transaction in this. Okay. Then for those of you who need reminders on how to set up an opportunity, come to our fabulous YouTube channel, and we've got commissions in command here and compliance in command videos here. So if you need refreshers for those of you who have not yet closed on their first transaction, these are the training videos for that. I'm gonna go back here, offers and commissions tab. This is where you're going to load the commissions information. And this is what communicates to the accounting office how much you're getting paid. This also tracks your cap and how much you guys have paid into your cap. So I'm glad that this is off and running now. It's really great. Do we have, a chat? Oh, Bethany, I think it must have been asking about the checklist. Okay. I've lost my PowerPoint. There we go. I'm not a whiz at this like Charlie, where you can just navigate through all of these windows for Zoom so easily. And then just one more comment. So you're uploading these executed documents within first 7 days, but of course, as you go along, there might be other amendments or notices that are going to need to be loaded for compliance review. So you'll upload that, and then I believe it automatically goes into a resubmit status once you place a new amendment into the command opportunity. So a big example, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have an inspection amendment. You need to load that for our review as well. Okay, so throughout the transaction, so like the next 7 to 25 days is when you're really going to be working through the inspection. So you're going to have that home inspection, another calendar item, by the way. You're going to have that general home inspection. You're going to have any follow-up inspections based off of what was found in that general home inspection. Make sure that you are uploading the inspection report and any test results to the opportunity. So if there's radon tests, for example, you'll upload those results to the command opportunity as well. At this point too, around the time that the inspection has happened, or depending on where you're at with the negotiating the inspection, I'm verifying with the lender at this point that they have ordered the appraisal. So, you're going to consult with your calendar, see that it's due 21 days out, and you might even want to make this a checklist point for yourself on the calendar, on when to check in with the lender that it has been ordered. Verifying that the lender is on track to meet the loan commitment deadline. So when I'm adding my dates and deadlines to the calendar, I'm automatically a week before the loan commitment is due. I have a big red flag to myself, check in with lender to make sure we're on track. That is our duty really as buyer's agents in this process when it comes to the financing contingency. The lender and the buyer are communicating with each other on a regular basis, and we're kind of left out of it, but we need to be in communication with the lender just to make sure that we're on track to receive that loan commitment deadline. Once that final loan commitment has been signed by the buyers and sent off to you and the buyers and signed by the buyers, then you're going to send that commitment letter to the listing agent, and this is what satisfies that contingency. I added this note last minute with regards to the inspection. Inspection reports do not go to the lenders. They just go to the listing agent and uploaded to the opportunity. Title commitment review. So actually, I think we need to add this to our checklists. So it just needs to be on your radar that we are going to be receiving a copy of the title commitment. And that, I would say, happens 2 to 3 weeks prior to closing, depending on when title is ordered. We'll go through ordering title when we do the seller's contract to close checklist. But you as a buyer's agent, it needs to be on our radar that we're going to be receiving this and need to send it off to our buyers. Okay, so within 7 to 10 days prior to closing. So if there is work that is getting done as a part of the inspection amendment or inspection negotiation, I should say, any lien waivers or paid invoices and permits that you are receiving, you're going to upload them to the opportunity and you're going to send them off to the buyer's lender as well. 1 week prior to closing, you're going to verify that your opportunity is approved. Unless it's approved, you're not getting paid. So it's really important for you guys to make sure that that's an approved status before closing happens. And then if it's not approved, if it's in return status, you can make any cleanup items and you'll have a time to make those cleanup items at that point. Working with all parties to schedule a time and a place for closing. So as a buyer's agent, it really depends on the lender. Our role is to making sure that this is getting facilitated. But lender and buyer may have already scheduled closing with one another. You're just checking in at this point and making sure that it has been scheduled. I usually just like to take control over it and send out an email to the lender and to the buyer, just kind of controlling where it's happening too. So I always like to have closings happen at the KW office. And then if it is going to happen at the KW office, you want to make sure to reserve a conference room. I think you guys do a SCADA system as well, so you can sign up online. That all said, I think it's typical that closings are happening directly at the buyer's title company, the lender's title company, whoever they've enlisted to do title work for that. So it might be out of your control as to whether or not it's going to happen at Keller Williams. Again, just like COVID purposes, I think they're trying to keep it under wraps and having control over where it's happening. At this point, you're going to be scheduling a final walkthrough. At this time, during the final walkthrough again, you can recall that buyer's dates and deadlines letter and look at the inclusions and exclusions list at this time. You're gonna, at this point, confirm that the repair work, any repair work that was negotiated is done at this time. And I just put a note in here, the home may not be vacant when you do a final walkthrough, depending on when you're doing it. Again, this is within 3 days prior to closing, so the seller still may be moving out. I also use this time to communicate with the listing agent of any like major building debris that could be likely that a seller would try and leave behind. Those are kind of those things you want to look for during that final walkthrough. But again, that's all scheduled within 3 days prior to closing.
Steph, may I add something in here too? Some of the times that we have a little issue is when the buyer thinks in their final walkthrough that they can bring their inspector back, or they can bring a vendor back.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure that was done correctly. This is not the time for that. If the buyer wants verification that the work was done, they have to make an appointment with the listing agent and the seller, of course, for that purpose, to bring the vendor back or bring an inspector back. But it's not a good idea because the inspection contingency is already passed, and there's nothing, unless they wrote it into the offer, that there was verification of work done. So I know some people think, oh, well, I'll just bring, the chimney guy back in at my walkthrough. That's really not allowed. You don't have permission to do so.
Right. Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. I feel like we're seeing that question more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So closing day. Awesome. Our roles at closing are actually pretty minimal. We're there to be a support for our buyers. But then we're also there to collect the final executed closing statement and closing disclosure from the, and then of course to collect your commission check. So as soon as you exit that closing, you're going to bring it right back to the office and turn in your commission check and your closing statement into the front desk person. So either to Megan or to Julia.
I'm sorry, I have a question on the walkthrough, the final walkthrough. If you schedule it, I know you have 3 days prior to close. If you schedule it, it's like the sellers still got all their belongings there and a lot of boxes, so you really can't see everything that you want to. Can you schedule another walkthrough right before close, or what's your viewpoint on that?
I have. I'll usually just do a quick run through right before closing, like if I'm on my way to the closing. As listing agents, we're communicating with our sellers that they have up until an hour prior to closing to be in the house. So if I feel, and you're kind of gauging this too, because sometimes you don't trust that that the house will be completely empty. So yes, you might, in that case, might want to do a final run through yourself as an agent to make sure. But you do have to get permission from the listing agent, of course.
Okay, and that's only for the agent. You can't bring back your buyer. And in other words, if I brought my buyer there and it was 2 days prior to, and everything was still there, the seller didn't fully finish packing and stuff like that, and it looks like they're not really ready to move out, and it's making my buyer kind of uncomfortable, and they want that final walkthrough like an hour before to make sure. Can you bring your buyer back at that point?
Again, I think it's just getting permission from the listing agent and the seller. Yes. So that's actually a good point. I'm glad you asked this question, because that's actually part of my process as well. When I'm setting up the final walkthrough, I will ask the listing agent, do you have a timeline for when seller plans to be completely out? because that will inform when I do the scheduling of the final walkthrough. So if, you know, if they're not going to be out until the morning of closing, then I might just make sure I'm doing that final walkthrough right after they're out and before closing. But maybe they're going to be out a week before, so then I know that 3 days is going to be fine. So
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to add here, there've been some complaints of listing brokers calling the Board of Realtors, saying that agents, sometimes with or without their clients, have been stopping in on the listing right before closing, or doing their own walkthrough, or actually taking their buyer through. Maybe they left an email or a voicemail to the listing agent that they were going to do that. But that does not constitute permission. And when they've done that, when the agent has taken themselves through or taken their client through right before closing, picked up the lockbox, doing all that, but don't have a firm permission from the listing agent to do so, some of these listing agents are filing complaints with the Board of Realtors that they're getting into the property without permission. So it's something that we really all have to watch right now, and make sure you never go into a listing without permission, and never send a client alone into a listing without you.
right. To bring up your point about coordinating keys and stuff, this is also another checkpoint item. Just coordinating all of those things with the listing agent as well, picking up the lockbox, and if there are going to be other keys on the table, and who's going to be delivering the keys to the buyer, if they're going to be available at closing, or if you need to make other arrangements. I feel like I missed a slide because I did. No, I had this, but I didn't read some of my notes. Okay, sorry, this is important, you guys. Also, in your communication with the lender, I am verifying with the lender that the buyer has received their closing disclosure, because this is something that must be sent to the buyer no later than 3 business days prior to closing. So this is a checkpoint item for myself. About a week prior to closing, I just quickly send the lender, send an email to the lender saying, or asking, has the buyer received their closing disclosure yet? I've made this a checkpoint item for myself as well, because I've run into trouble with this not being delivered on time. Some of these things, and that's kind of brings up a point of like, you're kind of micromanaging this process for a lot of people, and you know, I've had a lender get annoyed with me for even asking the question, because, you know, they're doing their job, you know, and of course they know the closing disclosure needs to get out, but, you know, it's just, again, part of our job is making sure that this is all running smoothly and we're avoiding any hiccups for our buyers. So where that's important, for example, with a closing disclosure, if that gets sent out even a day later, then it delays closing by another 3 days. So it's just important. And it's okay to be the bad guy or the annoying micromanager. So, and then another checkpoint item that I've added to my list along the way is verifying with the lender that the buyer has received their instructions for the closing funds. Just because I've had buyers confused on, you know, what they're supposed to be doing as far as bringing their closing funds to closing. So this is our final down payment, I mean. So we're just verifying with the lender, is it going to be a wire or cashier's check? And then making sure that the buyer has their final amount that they need. So really it's just a check-in with buyer and lender at the same time. Mr. Lender has Mr. Buyer received their final closing funds amount, and does it need to be a wire or a cashier's check?
What
So-
is that? I'm sorry. What exactly is a closing disclosure? Is that's what's like the net sheet?
It's the buyer's version of this closing statement, but it includes all of the lender's figures on it. So it's much more comprehensive. It's about I think 5 to 6 page document. And again, just basically the shell of it is a closing statement, but then includes all of the lender's figures as well. So.
So that's what's gonna also indicate what they need to bring to the table and so forth.
Yes, and it will figure out what their final closing amount is.
Yeah, okay.
I guess I have found that lenders will just send these closing disclosures and then there's no follow. I mean, and it includes what their final closing funds figure is, but they'll receive this closing disclosure and then there's no follow up to point out exactly like what and how much they need to bring, and how to bring it. So whether it's a wire again or cashier's check. So I mean, again, it's there, but it's not black and white on where to find this information. And if you're not familiar with how these documents look, a buyer's not going to know where to find that information. So I've just, again, made it a part of my process to follow up with the lender and ask them specifically. So I did want to point that out as well. But okay, so back to turning in that closing statement and the commission check. And then post-close, you're gonna wanna monitor the MLS to verify that the correct co-broker information was entered. So you just wanna make sure that you have been given credit for the sale when the listing firm goes ahead and closes out the listing and marks it as sold. But then kind of just echoing what I was saying in the beginning, as far as just using this as like a general guideline, your post-close checklist might be expanded depending on your follow-up communication with the buyer, any marketing checklist items that you might have as part of your post-close process. So that is it in a nutshell. This again is a really good guide, but I would definitely be encouraging you to expand on this as you guys go along and develop your own systems.
It's very good.
For other Joan,
Steph?
you're on.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
In the event that the co-broke does not enter in like our information correctly as the buyer's agent, like what steps do we take? Do we contact them? Do we contact their broker?
I usually just go straight to MLS and I CC them on the email. And
Oh, okay.
the administrator, I think it's MLS admin, or no, it's admin at metromls.com. I'll let them know the MLS number, let them know my MLS ID.
Mhm.
I'll CC the broker on
Okay,
as well.
cool. Thanks.
Any other questions from you guys? Just again, I just want to say that if you make this process smooth for your clients, these are the things that help inform a referral later on. I feel like during this process where a lot can get missed, and it's just, you can really shine with good communication and good organization in this part of the process. So, and if you're hiring a transaction manager, which, you know, I think eventually is the goal for everybody, it's still good to have an idea of how this flows. So, all right. We all good? Okay.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, you guys.
Thank you.
And no contract training next week because of family reunion. But then Joni will be hosting on agency the following week.
Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a good day.
Yep.